Hello, Storm friends. Welcome to the Haven. I'm Mussetta Lee Storm, but you can call me Muse. And today I'm going to show you how I make brown rice pudding. So, as I mentioned, I'm using brown rice in this, and I'm also using agave syrup instead of sugar. So if that's something you're interested in, keep on watching. To begin this recipe, we are going to preheat our oven to 275 degrees Fahrenheit or 135 degrees Celsius. Then we are going to grease a deep baking dish. I am using a 2-quart baking dish that is 7 by 9 by 2.5 inches. So that's 7 inches this way, 9 inches this way, and 2.5 inches deep. Now we're going to go ahead and get started on mixing up our ingredients. Our first ingredient is going to be half a cup or 107 grams of brown rice. We're going to wash that up and then stick it in a bowl and add more ingredients. 1 teaspoon or 3 grams of cinnamon. 1/8 teaspoon of allspice. This is roughly a little bit more than what would be like 3-ish pinches or so, maybe a little bit less. Sorry, no weight, it doesn't pick up on my scale. 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. I do not have a weight for this one either. I use fresh shaved nutmeg, but you can use ground stuff if you like. Half a teaspoon or 4 grams of salt. I'm using pink Himalayan sea salt. Apologies for the ice maker in the background. Apologies for the cats making noise. Next ingredient is going to be 1/3 cup or 125 grams of agave. Now we're going to mix all of this together before we pour it into our baking dish. What we want is for the rice to be coated in the agave and all of the seasonings that we put in before we add our milk. So now we're going to go ahead and dump this into our baking dish. So let me go ahead and get to that. So now we are going to add some coconut milk. I am using unsweetened coconut milk, but if you want to use sweetened, that's up to you. And we're going to add a whole quart of coconut milk. That's 4 cups. We're just going to dump, I'm just using a quart, so I'm just dumping my whole container in here. Now I know some people might be concerned about the coconut milk chunks. I have found that they tend to dissolve when you're baking this, so I'm not too worried about the chunks in my coconut milk, but if you're bothered by it, you can always take them out. Or like one of the things I sometimes have to do is I have to shake my coconut milk a little bit more to make sure that they break up a little bit so I can get that all out. Now that the coconut milk is in here, we're just going to mix this just slightly. We don't want to disturb it too much. And then we're going to stick this in our preheated oven. And for the first hour, what you're going to want to do is mix it about every 15 minutes or so, just to make sure that the coconut milk is still getting all through there and everything's mixed in. And then you're going to cook it for another 1.5 hours after that hour, if you want to add raisins. If not, you're just going to cook it for another 2 hours. But like I said, if you want to add raisins, which I'm going to be doing, so I'm going to be showing you how much raisins to use here in just a moment. I also soak my raisins, so I'm going to show you how I do that. And I will be right back with you once I stick this in the oven. While you have that baking, as I mentioned, it's a 3-hour bake in total. For the first hour, you want to mix about every 15 minutes to make sure everything's getting, concentrated with that coconut milk and getting the seasoning still, and that it's not just like settling in one spot. So after that first hour, if you're not going to add raisins, just cook it for 2 hours without opening the oven or mixing it or anything else. If you want to add raisins, we are going to add half a cup of raisins, or 80 grams. I soak my raisins to make them more plump and juicy. And so as you can see, this is my 1 cup Pyrex cup, Pyrex brand, whatever that is. And I have it above the 1 cup line filled with water after I had my raisins already in there. And this is filled with warm to hot water. It helps the raisins plump up a little bit more. And what we're going to do is, after we're done with that first hour, is we're going to let it just bake for an hour and a half without touching it. And then we're going to mix these raisins in after an hour and a half. And then we're going to cook it for another half an hour. And then it should be ready to pull out and cool down. But I'll come back to you when it's time to add the raisins again. But this is how I soak them. And I'll show you what they look like after they've been soaking for, what would that be, 2.5 hours? So I'll be back then. So it's been 2.5 hours now. Here are my raisins still soaking in the water. I'm going to drain these in just a moment and show you what those look like. Okay, so these are now drained. It does bring them up to a little more than half a cup at this point. They do plump up quite nicely. And I'm going to go ahead and mix these in to the rice pudding that I've already got in the oven. And then I'm going to cook it for another half an hour. And then I'm going to pull that out and I'll show you it when it's done. If you don't want to add raisins, you don't need to do this part. Just keep cooking it for the last 30 minutes and then pull that out to cool off. And I'll be back when that's ready. Okay. Sorry, quick little pop in. I should have actually mentioned, even if you're not adding raisins at this point, go ahead and mix that up because some of the seasoning may have settled on the top and you want to mix that in and make sure it's well incorporated into the rice pudding. Okay, so I'll be back with you guys in about a half an hour once the pudding is completely finished, and I'll show you what that looks like. And here is the rice pudding fresh out of the oven. I'm actually going to give it a quick little stir here. And now I'm just going to let it cool down, and then I'm going to enjoy some of it today, and then I'm going to put the rest into the freezer. And there we go. If you like my videos and you want to see more from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like my video, leave me a comment down below, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!